Okay, we're live. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to yet another of our Lumerous Forum, where we look at topics of interest. A lot of these topics that we discuss on Lumerous Forum comes in from our community, or we do a lot of horizon scanning here at Lumerous, and we spot some of these trending topics, and so therefore we organize these forums to have discussions around them so that people in our community, our clients, and well wishers can learn and be informed and participate in the discussion as well. So my name is Romeo Fs. I'm the founder and CEO of Lumerous. And before we jump into our discussion with our guests, really excited about our guest today. Just some housekeeping. So this event is being streamed live on LinkedIn, Twitter, now X, YouTube, and Instagram. So if you're joining on LinkedIn, use the chat function to ask any questions or give any comments. If you are on YouTube and X, use the comment section. We have members from the Lumerous team on monitoring each of these platforms, and all and we'll feed the questions into us so that we can answer them. We will also have a Q&A towards the end of the session. And if we are not able to respond to all your questions, we will post response on the platforms that the question was asked. And we will also include a response in a key learning document that we tend to put together at the end of each of these forums and circulate. So if you're not on our newsletter, I would recommend that you subscribe now so that you can get the key learning document. So today we will be discussing the topic of does corporate governance essentials for startup and small businesses. And basically we're looking at, is corporate governance a thing that small businesses and startups need. And I am really very pleased to be joined today by Mike Blackburn, OBE. Mike is a member of the Lumerous Advisory Board, someone who I've known for a number of years, and I would say one of the best persons to be involved in this discussion. Mike is from the northwest of England and spent 36 years as a corporate executive in private sector, most of that working for technology companies. He spent 25 years working at BT. When he left in 2018, he was both the chair of BT's Northwest Regional Board and head of digital for governments. Mike also has held several non-executive roles, in his lifetime. Some of them include the chairman of the Local Enterprise Partnership, the LEP for Greater Manchester. This is a private-public body which became the leading organization on the development of Greater Manchester growth strategy. And those of us who are in the UK know how Greater Manchester is now, one of those flagship cities across the UK. He was also a member of the Lancashire LEP, where he led the formation and implementation of the business growth hub for Lancashire, I think called Boost, and supported businesses in their challenges to access finance and skills and funding, etc. Mike is currently chair of Dixon Academy Trust. He's also chair of the Growth Company and a trustee of Lowry Theatre. Lowry Theatre, thank you. And we've had quite a number of discussions about that because I'm also a big fan of the arts. And he's also a non-exec at Transport for Greater Manchester. He was awarded an OB for his services to business and economy in the Queen's Honor List in 2015. Mike, welcome. So good to have you on the forum that you've been hearing so much about.
Indeed. It's great to see you, Romeo, as well, and have a
Yeah.
conversation with you and just continue some of the conversation we've been having over the number of years.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I think one of the places we could start is kind of giving people a definition of, what exactly is corporate governance and why should it matter? Period.
So I always think about that question of why do we use that language for a start?
True.
It's a language that puts people up. The words corporate governance essential. It's like, is that really how we really talk? And you think, how would I talk to somebody in a cafe, in a pub, over a dinner course somewhere?
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
never use those words. You'd be talking about how do you run your business?
So true.
How do
Yeah.
you ensure that you make the right decisions? How do you ensure that you are purposeful and aligned? And then how do you ensure that you're agile as a business? So it's about trying to ensure you've got the right spans of control in your business, the right structures and frameworks to do the right things for you at the right time. It's an evolution, not a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
has to evolve. It should be talked about every year. Are we doing the right things? And it's important, but it's not the same for every company.
Yes. Yes.
If you're
Yes.
large or small, they're different. But if you're 50 small companies, you might do it in slightly different ways. And
Yeah.
you should start thinking about it in day one.
And you're so right. And we're going to come to the different stages of businesses and what, what governance, let's call it governance, means for each of them. But, when most people hear of corporate governance, you're so right. And as someone who is a corporate governance professional, I've never thought about it the way how you've just described it. Why do we use that terminology? Because it tends to sound scary,
It does.
because when people think of corporate governance, they think of these large corporates, as it would say. Someone posted on one of our posts for this, when we posted this on LinkedIn about this event, they said that it's unfair for the same level of governance to be that's imposed on large companies to be imposed on startups and SMEs. Would you agree? And if so, what should good governance look like for startups and SMEs in general terms? Because we're going to talk about the different stages. You started talking about some of those stuff, but what are some of the I would say the core principles that and what should that look like for these groups of companies?
So the one thing it shouldn't be nobody should be thinking about, it's not about bureaucracy, which is what people think about corporate governance being, just something like bureaucratic. And for a small, agile organization, that'd be like sailing a yacht and throwing the anchor out at the same time. It's going to drag you back, and that's not what you want. But if you're sailing that yacht, you need to know where you're going. You need to know how fast you want to get there. What capacity does your boat have? Who's on the boat with you, and are you all doing the right things at the right time? I tell you what, Romeo, when you might find this when you're talking to a lot of startups, and you ask about how do you make decisions, it sometimes can be a really cloudy response you get from people, and you think, I'm not quite sure do I go to you or do I go to your partner? Do I go to your CFO or your COO? How do I do it? So governance helps you structure that kind of stuff at an early stage.
Yes.
How soon should you think about it? I would say from day one. But going back to my point about the language, you might start a company, you might have an advisor. You might have somebody who you just talk to on a regular basis, a person you respect. That is governance in the lightest sense, that you're seeking the advice of somebody to help you, guide you. You could ignore advice, but you're taking that experience and advice. So that's the first starting point for an individual thinking about that journey. How do I get on that journey? It might be your accountant, it might be your lawyer, it might be your best friend, your dad, your mum, your sister, your brother. It doesn't matter. That's the first start of it. And
I would say that would be more like the early stages when you're in the idea pre-seed kind of, so the foundational practice. So now that you've kind of started that discussion, so that's the early stage, and then the next stage of the business would be like the seed stage. So let's kind of go through each of those stages, and then you can then probably give our listeners what you know governance should look like at each of these stages. So we started with the early stage. So let's look at the seed stage. So that's like, when you just start getting some money and get up and running. What should that kind of look like?
So you've got to think about governance from your stakeholders' point of view as well as your own.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when your stakeholders are changing. So you're now starting to get seed funding.
Yeah.
For which the people who are giving you funding will be looking for some responsibility for you as a business that you're going to apply back to that, including paying back or giving a return on their investment, depending on what funding you've got.
Yeah.
So they will expect you to have a little bit more structure. That might be that your business plan is much better defined.
Right.
Within that business plan, it will have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It will start to have a set of objectives and measures. So your funders will want to know, are we on track? Are we going in the right direction at the right speed to the right place? And are we going to get there? They might turn around to you and say, how do you know?
Yes.
So where do you get those measures from? Where do you get the answers from, responses? And if you're not a finance person, do you have financial advice?
Yes.
Are you getting somebody when they are not in the room with you? They want to know that the business is in good shape and their investment is one that is likely to, not guaranteed to, but likely to make a return for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because let's face it, some early seed funding is intended in the right place, and it doesn't always have the right results.
Yeah.
Stuff gets in the way every so often. So you start to have that structure around KPIs or objectives, but I would make it. You need to keep it light touch to a degree as well. You don't want to be burdened by saying, I want a meeting every week. I want a flight check every Monday morning, please. That's not what you need at that point.
But also at this point, you need to make sure, wouldn't you say at this point is where things like you're thinking about, do I register the business and what structure it should look like? Do I get a VAT registration, all of those kinds of regulatory and compliance kind of stuff as well, right?
Yeah, I've got to say, when I was setting my small business of my own when I was leaving BT, just to set up one, just to see how it went, and it was a bit of fun actually doing it. And it was never intended to turn over shed loads. I just wanted to know how it did it and experience it. I went to see the Chamber of Commerce actually, and I spoke to people in the Chamber of Commerce that I knew, and they advised me and said, you need to talk to an accountant, which I did, and I found an accountant who I could get on with.
Yeah.
I didn't go to. I wanted one who was on my wavelength, who understood that I'm not an accountant. I'm not technically minded. I'm more. I see more things in pictures rather than in numbers and words. Mm-hmm. So I need to fill that gap in for me. And it was my accountant who then said, right, let's think about all those things you said. And my answer to him was, do I need to do all those on day one? And the answer was no, I didn't. I don't need to think about VAT on day one. I don't need to think about employment law on day one. I don't need to think too much about health and safety to a degree, because mine's a consulting business. So I wasn't employing a factory. But I did have to think about something I'd never thought about before, personal indemnity. If I'm giving advice to somebody, I need to indemnify the business against bad advice or unintended consequences. Yeah. So they filled in the little gaps for me, and they said, "Let's meet every quarter on a meeting like on a Teams meeting or on a Zoom meeting." And we met every quarter just for half an hour to chew the fat. And at the appropriate point, he said, "Now you need to consider VAT because you're now starting to get an amount of income where you might exceed the threshold." Yeah. And we started doing it, and they were really helpful in that kind of guidance for me. As that professional guidance that I didn't have myself, and it reinforced in me. But however, Romeo, the crucial thing they kept coming back to say, tell us what your business wants to do. They were really clear on, you need to guide us on the purpose, the direction of your business, and we will help you structure it behind that, rather than the other way around, rather than me being held back by a structure or a framework.
And what do you think they meant by that when they asked that question?
So for me, how ambitious am I? Do I want to be a million-dollar organization?
Right. Right.
Do I
Right.
want to grow and employ 5 people? Do I want to be reliant on just me? Or should
Right.
I have, it might be, Romeo, that said, you need to employ these people, or you have them as associates, or you have them
Right.
as external, and you pay for them on a daily basis, as it
Yes.
were. So it was thinking about my ambition to grow. And because
Mhm.
because I didn't want to run it as a business, it was just for 10% of my time when I was going to be doing those things, it wasn't the be all and end all. So for
Right.
me, that was very different to how you might have set up Lumerous, for example.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah.
Probably because I'm 30 years older than you, in a different stage of life. But it's understanding me and my organizer and what my ambition was.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that was really helpful to do it. So it wasn't a one size fits all.
Yeah. So we're now, that was, you're getting seed money, the business growing. We're in early growth stage. What should governance look like when you get to that stage? Say, for example, you are now, like 500,000 to 1 million in terms of turnover. The early growth stages. What do you think the governance structures of that business should look like or could look like?
So you're probably now in a business at that point where you're starting to look at having people working in an organization.
Yeah.
More than one. You think about tiers of management. So
Yeah.
do you have a board of directors, or do you have an advisory board, or do you have an executive committee or a management? How do you get ideas out? How do you, if you as a leader, how do you tell people and include people in their decision making as necessary for the organization? Because you're working in a small team, but you're still accessing, your stakeholders are still important. Your financial backers are
Yes.
still important.
Yes.
In one of the companies I was working with and advising, they had 5 different financial backers for this organization. Each one wanted different things. Some wanted to meet every month. Some wanted hands-off approach. They trusted the leadership of what was going on. So we had to start creating very light touch PDFs or data of information that could feed back to those individuals who wanted that information on a regular basis, and
Right.
allow them to ask questions. And some of them just wanted the evidence that and the reassurance that their money's well invested and that you're on the right track to getting either the returns or the growth that you want. But it's about managing your stakeholders, managing your teams, and you're starting to put structure in place. Then you've got your legal side where you've got compliance issues around, to your point, around VAT, or about PAYE, or about in the UK there's a pension law where you've got to register your company or decide you're not going to register your employees to pay for a pension, but you have to determine yourself out at that situation. There's a lot of things in. When I started mine up, there was a lot of things in using software. I was using Xero.
Right.
Other software
we use QuickBooks. Yeah.
And I found Xero to be pretty helpful actually in putting.
Yeah.
If I didn't know how to do a VAT return, I could click on it and it would take me to a webinar and get downloads of information which I could validate online with other people. Or should I be thinking about? Well, personal indemnity was quite an easy one, because I could not do it. But how do I claim for expenses for my employees? They were really, really helpful in that. And I'm cheap in the sense that I'd rather do it myself than go to my accountant who's going to charge me 100 quid an hour just for the conversation to tell me
it's frugal. It's frugal. You're frugal, Mike, not cheap. Frugal.
but there are some things that you can self-help in those things, but the compliance around the legalities, am I filling these forms in the right way? Your software can often help you do that, I wouldn't necessarily go to friends. I might go to experienced or professional friends for doing that, who are advising me to help me in the same way as most people do. So your structure then is still going to, at what point do you form a board? Or
that was going to be my next kind of follow-up question. Like, so we've had the pre-seed, we have the seed. Now we have the early growth, and the next stage is usually, Series A, Series B, and beyond. Like, at what stage would you say it would be recommended to have a formal board in place and all the other infrastructure around governance?
I'm going to dodge the question in one sense, Remy. There's no direct answer to that. It's when it feels, well, it's two senses in a sense. One is when you feel it's appropriate, and or your stakeholders, your investors feel appropriate. And again, just don't think of a board of directors being bureaucracy and corporate. You're having a span of layers of an HR director, a COO, a CFO, a CIO, a CTO, and all the O's you can get. You don't need all those. You might have the owner or the leader of the business. You probably have a financial person who leads at that point. You might not have a head of strategy. That might be you as the owner of the organization still. But once you start getting 2 or 3 in a leadership position, and you've got people underneath that, it's now worth thinking about whether you call it a board of directors or an executive committee or a management team. But the point of it is defining who has responsibility for doing what in your organization, for making decisions, and how you will make a decision.
Right.
How do you ratify those decisions?
Yeah.
How will you validate those decisions at some point? Who has the authority to make those? Because you're now realizing as the head of that organization, you've no longer got the time to be doing all the things that you were doing. You've got to trust people to do it, but you want a framework in which these things are happening appropriately. So, example, you might say to people, you have the ability to approve up to £10,000.
Yes.
But not above that. So you put a rule in place.
Yeah.
And that's all governance is. It's a set of accountable rules that you're putting in place to give you a toolkit that enables you to manage and lead the organization in the appropriate way.
Yes.
Go back to my point, though. Your investors at some point will expect it, or even tell you, it's time. I want to see what your structure look like. And as soon as they say to you, what's your structure, you realize they want to know, what are your rules? What's your accountabilities? How do you seek reassurance? And once you start to get that level, you're probably starting to be audited by somebody who equally wants to see it. I'm going to go into another room there now, Romeo, in terms of you might start to have a risk table.
Yes.
For your risks of your organizations.
Yeah.
Which leads into a big company. We're going to risk matrices and risk appetites.
Yeah.
Even small ones need to start thinking about the risk appetites, and you will talk about it, but never maybe have a risk committee at that point. But it's something that goes to the exec or the management.
And it just goes to show that, a lot of times when people hear the word corporate governance, they think of a board.
Yeah.
And basically, what you are saying is that a board is great, but it's not the board. It's the infrastructure, the processes, the systems that you have in your company that helps to make sure that the company runs efficiently, ethically, and deliver value. That's what governance is really all about, really.
I wrote this one down for you. I said it's a toolkit, and this is my words, a toolkit that enables your management and your board to deal more effectively with the challenges of running your company, putting processes and controls in place that in the interest of your stakeholders, your shareholders, your employees, your customers, and your community.
Spot on. That's a tweetable moment right there, as Oprah would say. Tweet. Yes, we're definitely going to create a meme for that one. That's so spot on. Definitely. So what now that, we've been talking about the board and we've established that it's not necessarily about the board. What are some of the advantages you would say of having proper governance within your startup or small business?
So I would say there are multiple, but let me give you 2 or 3 really big ones. I think for me, one is about gaining control. So one of the hardest things as you grow an organization is how do you keep control and how do you release potential without losing control? And governance gives you the structures and the frameworks you put in place to make the effective decisions that you need to make, managing the risk you want with the appropriate safeguarding rules and regulations that you want in your organization. These could be really light touch. They don't
Yes.
need to be meetings every Thursday morning. These could be really, really light touch. But that should give you more assurance that the organization is in control. You're not going to drive your car and take all your hands off the wheel, look out there, use your phone, sitting in the back seat without it being an autonomous car. You're not going to do all that. But in an organization, you might need to be sitting in the front seat now doing things while somebody else navigates for you, or somebody else presses the pedals for you. So that will be the first one. The second one, which is not often talked about, but I would argue that as you grow your governance level, you get diversity of opinion and views. So no longer is it one person's view. You're paying people that you trust. You're probably paying them a lot of money relative to your turnover, and that doesn't matter what the number is. But you're employing them for a good reason because they're damn good at their jobs. So you must value their opinion, and you're getting diversity of views. So having a board or a structure or a framework where you bring people together to discuss those objectives and how well we're doing, you're now getting a good, diverse set of views and opinions.
Yeah.
And those back to my point earlier on about whether you're advisors or non-execs or whatever you call these people, whether you pay them or you're not paying them, it doesn't matter. They might have a different view to you, but you can be respectful and listen to them. That's what they're there for. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to implement what they do, but you might ask them why they're advising you that way, or why they're suggesting it, or what's the rationale for doing it. So it's that piece for me about diversity of view, and that only for me adds strength to the organization.
Because most times when you think of whether or not it's the senior leadership team, or even if you think of it, a board per se, these are individuals with different experiences, who have probably worked in different industries. Absolutely. So they bring different ideas. They know the different challenges that that exist, etc. So yeah, I completely agree with that, and it's one of the advantages that we have seen in terms of at the stage that we're at. We have a board of advisors, and it's having that ability to pick up the phone and have a conversation with Mike and say, listen, we have this client, this is what they want, what's your opinion on it? Do you think that the commercials that we're, as I've done with you a lot of times, do you think the commercials that we have around this make sense? How could you help us make this much, much better? And or someone else on the board who might have technology experience, like Ed, picking up the phone and said, look, we're thinking about this kind of technology. What do you think? It's just having those different kind of viewpoints that helps, especially when you are a founder, that's probably just, you still have an SLT, but these external kind of viewpoints as well helps you in terms of getting outside of your head, challenging your thinking, and also helps you to say, okay, I'm not really getting mad, in terms of my thinking, or helps you with a completely different perspective that you haven't really seen.
Completely. And even a large organization will have those non-executives on the board who've got power on the board, but they're there to give advice and guidance. They're there to seek assurance and reassurance. We should flip back there, Romeo. One of the early questions you're talking about, where advisors are really helpful, is in structure of your company. Should you be a PLC? Should you be a social enterprise?
Yes.
Should you be a community-based company? Should you be a trust of a charitable trust?
Yeah.
So I use that word, which I didn't really explain properly, when I said, what is the purpose of your organization?
Yes.
So defining that at the early stages is really, really quite useful, because then it determines potentially what structure you might have for your organization, and therefore what governance you require in place about compliance and regulation.
Yes.
Forgive me, I immediately went into, it's going to be a business that has to be registered as a PLC type. or limited by guarantee or whatever organization, and it clearly doesn't.
Yeah, because each of those different structures demand different kinds of governance structures that needs to be in place.
Absolutely.
Right, a PLC, like we were registered as a PLC, is a completely different ball game than being registered as a limited business.
Indeed.
So you've sat on a number of boards, Mike. Formally structured boards as non-exec directors. What are some of the advantages of having a board with we know we have the senior leadership team. They're usually diverse. They have diverse thinking, etc., to help to grow the business. But when you have a board that is made up of people who are not in the business, that are coming non-exec directors, as they are called, what are some of the pluses or minuses of having a board? I mean, we touched on some of them, but having a board structured that way, a group of individuals that are people who are not in the business with people who are in the business, kind of working together for the business.
So there's both advantage and disadvantage. The one thing you've got to make clear, first of all, is non-execs are not there to run the business.
Right. Yes.
The execs are there to run the business. The non-execs are there to seek assurance that the executives are running the business in the appropriate way that is structured under the rules and amendments, the articles of amendments, whatever it is, however that organization is set up. Remember, right. I said you have a document about the purpose, the structure, the framework, who's accountable, how do you make decisions, all those terms of reference, or whatever you want to call those, articles of association, are written down. And as a non-exec, you're there to ensure that they follow those rules and regulations, that they are on track financially and economically and socially to meet all their purposeful objectives.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing that, that's in my experience so far, that's the bit I don't find most interesting, because it's kind of semi-technical in a sense that you got to do. You just have to do that. What I found best, I'll give you an example of what I've been doing in one organization. I've been helping it get closer to its customer. Think about the customer experience. Because I've got a background in doing some of that. Right. Thinking about different methods of engaging your customers. How do you go on the customer journey in your organization? And I found, for example, that they talked about its purpose, then it talked about its mission, then it talked about its objectives. It was 3 layers down before they even mentioned the word customer.
Wow.
And I said, how can the customer be the heart of your business if you don't even talk about it until it becomes one element of one part, 3 layers down? It has to be there front and center, not in your top level, your purpose, but it's got to be in the top 2 there.
Yes.
So I've been helping them go on what I call or deliver their customer experience program, just challenging and thinking about introducing them to individuals or books I've read or amazing people I've met or organizations I've met, and then validating along the way, asking the daft laddie question every so often, the question that nobody wants to ask. So I'll ask,
yes.
Why do you do that? What result did you expect to see? So good non-execs and good advisors will not only challenge, but they'll support. They'll get you to think. A number of times, Romeo, people come back saying, "Oh, there's only one option here." No. One of my rules is I want you to give me at least 3 other options. I want to see 4 options for everything.
Because usually that one option tends to be biased to that person's viewpoint.
Of course,
right?
It does. Of course it does. And back to the point of a diversity of view in the management team, the executive team, you get the different views. And the aim of a good leader is to listen to all those views without sitting on the fence and sitting on one or behind one. I always remember going to a board meeting when a financial director in BT was there and he was chairing the board. And cutting a long story short, I did say to him at the end, why do you never speak first? You always ask for everybody else's opinion first.
Yeah.
And he said, because as the leader, if I tell everybody my opinion, those who are quieter in the room, those who are don't willingly give their views, might simply say, well, that's the boss's opinion, therefore I'm not going to speak against it.
Yes.
So I get the others in the room first. And do you know what? He said, I get better ideas than the one I ever had
Yep.
in doing things. And it encourages people, you develop people. And that's partly what your non-execs are there to do. To ask
Absolutely.
those questions and to sometimes be the first to ask the question, but never necessarily the first to give an opinion
Yep.
on something without understanding it all first.
And being like devil's advocate sometimes. I mean,
Oh,
you
for
might
sure.
even already agree with the viewpoint, but you're actually just poking and being devil's advocate just to see if the if the exec has really thought through the
Absolutely.
thing that they're presenting.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And back to my point about the customer experience, as a non-exec, I'll be asking that question. Well, how will my 15-year-old nephew view it, and how will my 85-year-old mum view that? The
Yeah.
two ends of spectrums. Yeah, my mum's digitally a digital native. She's brilliant digitally, but my youngster, my nephew, doesn't use email. He's more social media driven. So
True.
different aspects of the digital technology band, and we
Yeah.
label everything digital. So my as a non-exec, I'll unpick that word digital.
Yes.
Yeah.
True.
So again,
Yeah.
good corporate governance allows your non-execs to challenge, help, support at different stages of your journey. Oh,
What
sorry.
about, what
Sorry,
about,
Romy, you need to think about this though. That means you might change your advisors en route.
good
You
point.
don't
Yes.
have to keep the same people on board. So keeping terms of engagement,
Yeah.
but writing down. I'd expect if I'm being employed by somebody or not employed, who's helping, you normally would expect to. So what is it you're looking to get out of me as an experienced individual, and for how long should I do this before we start challenging to say, is it time to move on? Because challenge is good.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
might still be re-engaged, but you might time out. And better the person that puts the hand in the air, say, I think I've timed out on this now. You're better than I am. You've moved on. You've stripped me of what I've got. I can no longer help.
Yeah.
That's a good challenge. Otherwise, your organization will get held back by the weakest link again.
So true. What about this whole notion of stakeholder confidence? And by stakeholders, I mean, your suppliers, your customers, the community that you work in, the wider community. I mean, do you think that plays a pivotal role, or do you think stakeholders look up to the fact that, oh, they have a board or have a board of advisors? Do that helps to build confidence in stakeholders that interact with your business?
For sure. It's if I'm starting to look at using an organization, the first thing I'll do is go on its website or look at its articles of association, or look at how does it name, what's its name and its purpose. Even if you register a company's house in the UK, you still have to put a title in there for your organization. Are you a consulting organization or a community of interest? So I'm intrigued by that always, but as to how they name themselves. Then as I start to get to, if I'm going to work with them, I want to know how do you make decisions? Where's your structure of your legal structure of the organization, as well as or a charitable company or community interest company? So how do you fit in those? What is your management practices? Who makes decisions? How do you make decisions? How do you review those decisions? And how do you make sure, so what's the basis, the foundation for making those decisions? So do you really reflect the interest of the local community, but you say you do you really? So show me where in your decision making that the community has a voice to kind of interact and to help in those. How do you deal with conflict of interest?
Yes.
So if your community you're building a road and the community is anti the road, but your local authority wants the road. How are you going to manage that conflict in doing all those things? That's a policy, and policy is one part of governance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I like the idea you shared as well. Like, a lot of people don't recognize that this can also help in terms of innovation as well, because of the questions as well, and also the adaptability, because I mean, as circumstances change and the geopolitical environment change, this is where the non-execs can also bring their kind of experiences to kind of
sure.
Yeah.
They bring impartiality, even if they're being paid, non-execs have to bring impartiality. That's
Yeah.
the whole point of being a non-exec. They bring constructive challenge, and your state. Some people have on the board as an advisor. Sometimes, depending on your company, might have somebody from the local community on the board. If you're a housing association, why wouldn't you have a resident on your board?
Yeah,
reflects those. I got 17 schools that I chair the board of, the 17 schools, and all our schools have a pupil representative, a staff representative, and a community representative, a parent representative, as well as a community representative. So we listen to those voices. To your point, though, earlier on, we always say, just because you have the ability to give us the voice doesn't mean to say your answer is right, the right one.
Yes.
And we still might do something different. But we will respectfully listen to your voice. And if we choose not to go with you, we'll tell you why we've chosen a different route.
Yeah.
So you get that constructive challenge from individual. To your point, Remy, you get specialist expertise.
Yes. Yes.
People can really give you in-depth advice and guidance. And that's worth checking out when people say they've got specialist expertise. When? Have they got 20 years of experience, or is it 1 year repeated 19 times? Which is not necessarily 20 years experience. They enhance your reputation.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yes.
If you get the right people in there, the ability to go to your backers and your financiers and say, I'm doing these things, and I've got this person who's now advising, formally structured here.
Yes.
Someone looking at, wow, somebody's got that experience. Thank you. And as you grow reputationally, that helps. They bring networking and external contacts.
Yes. Yes.
But you've got to be clear whether you're going to use them or not, and how you're going to use them. Because from a non-exec point of view, if that's all they want, I'm not interested.
Yeah, right.
So don't do it to me later on in life and then say, oh, give me 15 of these, and can you go and sell on our behalf? That's not what I'm there for as a non-exec or advisor. They can give you advice on compliance and governance.
Yes. Yeah.
Things you've personally I'd never even thought about. But they can give you advice and guidance on doing that. And the other one, of course, is risk management. If they've been in it, what could they do to help mitigate risks, to advise you on that? And you might find 2 or 3 people who could help you on all those areas. But I can't think of a single organization who's got to that past pre-seed, that early venture stage, who isn't start thinking about all those things.
Yeah.
And if they're going to get funding, I'm pretty sure their funders will be asking some of those determining questions. And they want to make sure it's not just Romeo who's telling me all the answers. There is a structure and a framework and a format behind that I can really trust.
Yeah. And you can't find one non-exec director that will bring all of that. So, or one person that will bring all of that. You brought up the whole point of conflict of interest. Yeah. And it is it's a question that someone also posted on our social media feed around this topic as well. Was, they wanted to understand for a startup or SME, what does conflict of interest looks like, and if we can help them to kind of identify that.
From an advisory point of view, or from the board point of view, or the organization?
I think from the organization point of view, but I would also say from a board point of view as well.
Okay, so
or from a governance perspective, what does conflict of interest look like?
So I would expect everyone I've been engaged with who's asked me for advice and guidance and becoming a non-executive advisor, whatever, to at least list out which organizations am I currently working for, and which organizations have I got a vested interest in. So if you were to employ me, Romeo, and I was already investing in one of your competitors, or I'm advising one of those, you'd want me to at least share that with you. And there's an obvious conflict, because I'm now conflicting with it. You'd also, if you looked at me and said, you've got ethical things in your background, Mike, and your current scenario of organization you're working with, which don't play to your purpose and ethics, there's a conflict where you would easily probably say, we shouldn't be working together. You might have global conflicts, but it's about being open and transparent about what your interests are, what interests you have in other organizations, or have had in your past that you need to explore and explain. So why is that important? Because if I was a financial advisor and started financially advising you to go and get an investment from X, and X is a company I have significant shares in or interest in, or my wife does, or my children do, whatever, there's a conflict. So why would I try and increase stakeholder value just for me? That doesn't increase stakeholder value for across the piece. Actually, it shouldn't be for me at all.
Yeah.
So I put that hand in the air. Now you get situational conflicts as well as, so some conflicts you have to declare and say, I can't possibly work for you in that case.
Yeah.
That's an easy one. But you might have situational ones. So when I was on the board of the LEP, and they were looking to find major companies like BT, Vodafone, Virgin to come in and invest in putting fiber infrastructure in the ground. As soon as that came to the board on the board paper, I declared my interest, which is on statutory on the list there anyway.
Yes.
And I will step away from being chair.
You recuse yourself. Yes.
I'm allowed to be in the room.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to make a comment. I'm allowed to respond to information. So if there's something factually incorrect, or they say, what does fiber mean? I can give them the answer. Once they start getting into potential contract or financial information, I would leave the room and not even see the papers.
Yes.
That they're all looking at. So there'll be separate set of papers, and I wouldn't ask questions, and I go back in the room when they're finished, but I'm out of it at that point. Or if we're making decisions on investing in a company and I knew it was you that we were about to invest in, I'd recuse myself immediately, saying, I know Romeo is a personal friend and a business person I know and recognize, and I can't possibly be involved in that decision-making process.
Yeah. I remember being a NED on a particular board, and the founder wanted to award a contract to one of his family's friends or something like that, a cousin or something like that. And the cost of the contract was much higher than all the other bidders that came in, right? And that in itself is a conflict of interest. And he thought that because, I am the owner of this business, I have majority stake, I can make a decision. The board had to say, look, that's why we are here. That's why you have a board, so that we can protect you. Because at the end of the day, if we award this contract and this person runs off with the money, then you're going to have to be answerable, to all of this. So we had to then pretty much just kind of say, there is a process that needs to go through. You have to identify that this person personally. And we only knew that he knew this person personally because another member of the board brought it up, right?
Absolutely.
And we have to make sure that there are the proper infrastructure is in place. So at the end of the day, we had to say to him, look, we have to go through all three of these. We have investors that we're answerable to. So we have to go through all three of the bids that have come in, and we have to select, or your committee has to select the best bidder for this job. If it happens to be this person, that is fine. If it's not, and then you just have to live with it. Then that's just it.
Absolutely. And but it's that thing. And if you go back to whether you're a startup or anything else, and link that back into governance, it's governance steers those, and we've touched on this a couple of times. Is steering companies towards a sustainable growth platform, and ethical excellence.
Yes.
So how do you bring those two things together? And that's what governance ultimately does, about sustainable growth and ethical excellence. But big corporations have these big bureaucracies that help them do that. Startups face that challenge, and small businesses, in balancing the power dynamics between ownership and control. So who's owning it and who's controlling the business. And that's quite a balancing act, because sometimes the owner doesn't want to release control.
Yes.
It's at that pivotal point when I remember a friend of mine, she went off on holiday and was away for a month, and came back, and the business had run brilliantly while she's away. And that was a pivotal moment for her. Realized, it can run without me, so I can change how I work. That might sound silly, but she didn't recognize that before she went away. She said,
Yes.
But that balance though is
it's hard
really
for founders, as someone who has founded a number of businesses. It's hard for us founders to do that. But you are before. One of the other things as well is, like just practically looking at, we spoke a lot about the fact that governance is about putting in the structures in place to make sure that the business run efficiently. And just before we came on, you were sharing an example of this on a small businesses that you're on the board of, and it would be great if you kind of share that as well with our audience, so that I think we have like 112 people on this webinar right now, so that they can see practical terms. This was where you're talking about the widgets and the change in the office and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So sometimes your advisors, your non-execs, your people who are just coming to help you can see things that you can't see. And I was working in an organization who they were an engineering-based organization, and they were employing 20, 30 people. They had very informal practices in play to doing things. So as a good example, which I'd spotted, sorry, we're about to, there was significant investment of money coming in, which allowed them to grow on the new contracts, and they were going to move offices or grow on a second floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asking the question of how are you going to determine where people sit, because it really matters. Not emotionally doesn't matter, but actually practically for the business. And I'd been in that morning, and I'd seen that one of the engineers had come in at 7 o'clock, and the person who does all the procurement as well as the health and safety and various other aspects of the small business was in the office. And as he walked in, he happened to take, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I'll call them crimpers, a tool. And he shouted across the office to Joe and said, "Hey, Joe, I'm just taking the last set of crimpers with me." So, yeah, off you go. And Joe immediately went on the system and ordered some more crimpers. And I said to them, that's an informal method of communicating.
Yes.
When you go into this new organization, where are you going to sit Joe? Oh, Joe's going to be upstairs and the engineers are on the downstairs floor. How's that informal communication going to go on? Because the engineers will walk in with the best will in the world. They'll take the last crimpers, and they'll be determined that they'll fill in the form when they come back at the end of the day, but probably will forget. Meanwhile, Romeo rocks up, wants to have the crimpers for a big job he's got, probably the biggest job he's ever had, and there's no crimpers left. So what they introduced, rather than change structure and bring people down, they introduced Slack. And said, let's have an informal social media type activity where we can just inform people. So the engineer was able to whack a message quickly to Joe and say, last crimpers, just taken them. And it took him a couple of seconds to do it and walk out. But it was just a good way of thinking about the informal communications that go on and how you don't overtly, you didn't put an email system in place for that. You didn't put a form in place of take the form off the wall, fill it in, stuff it over here and pass it round. It was something dead quick and easy. But do you know what? The owner hadn't spotted that.
Yeah.
Why would he? He hadn't been down there for ages at 7 o'clock in the morning when the engineers arrived, because he's moved on from that. So it's that sometimes silly things that you spot that could help get at least stop making mistakes in the future.
And I like that really very simple kind of example, because it shows how simple, having good governance in your organization can help with the efficiency of your organization, right? Because if the crimpers go completely, then your entire system, runs out. Listen, we could talk about this forever, and we have a few questions coming in. So just before we go, I think one of them that I'm spotting here is, what are the potential risks of neglecting corporate governance in startups? I know we spoke a bit about that, but can you just expand on that a little bit more?
So the obvious one in doing that is you get into legal difficulties. You fail to register for the right taxation or the right material things with your government, whatever your government requires. You just don't fill in your. I mean, the worst thing for a small, but not the worst thing. What a bad thing for a small business is to be late in filing, as an example, on a quarterly basis. And it's the most boring thing to have to file, I'm afraid, but it has to be done. And if you miss the date, you don't know the date, that that pitch to that new investor is coming tomorrow, and I've got to file tomorrow, I'll go and do the pitch and I'll file the next day.
Yeah.
So you've got all the compliance and regulatory things that could go wrong. You could lose. The worst thing for me, though, if you don't think about structure and decision making, you might have some amazing potential people in your business, in your 5, 10, 15, 20 employees, who suddenly get thinking, nobody's listening to me. I've got great ideas, and there's no structure framework to chat about ideas, or nobody engaged with my part of the business. I don't see the bosses very often. Nobody tells me where I'm going. What's the org? And they leave. And it's hard to replace a good person, let alone a great person. And it costs you money to have to recruit. So think about it for the internal of how you communicate, particularly as a small organization. You in your organization, when you first started off, Remy, if you've got 5 people, you'd often have a weekly chat with them as you go in the office, and now you're doing Teams or whatever, just to have, and you're doing that as much to listen as you are to speak. But your people want to be proud of you as well, so you're going to tell them what you're doing. But once you get to 30, 40, 50, 60 people, you need more structural engagement. You might have a Coke and a pizza on the third Friday of the month, whatever. Just to tell them what the results are, or that in fact you got investments or whatever. And the final one, the impact on your investors or stakeholders or communities. If you fail to do things, reputation is quite a fragile thing. And if you become reputable for bad practices, or for not filings, or for ignoring your local community, or your stakeholders or your investors not getting the right information, that's just damaging to the next level of your business that you want to be. Remember what I said at the very start. Governance is phased. Governance is evolving as the company grows over time. So you start with small governance, the right governance though, and then you grow your governance over time.
And that leads, that's spot on. That leads to, I'd probably say, the final question that I think this is coming from YouTube. It says, I'm a founder of a Series A funded business. I'm overwhelmed with day-to-day operations, but want to implement good governance. What should be my what my starting point or first step?
Well, first of all, you've recognized it. That's the first step. Recognizing that a change is required. So the second step is doing something about it, and thinking what is getting in the way. So to go back to my point of what is the purpose of the organization, its direction, its objectives, its KPIs, its function, and what is getting in the way. And sometimes getting in the way is lack of time. Sometimes it's you're not available to make the decisions. In that small organization about the crimpers, by the way, I was talking about, quite often in that room, I would hear something issues over here. We need to buy something, but the boss is out and we haven't got the authority to buy. So I asked them, can we put some structures in place of delegated authority to spend up to a limit of £50, £100 or whatever. So you do, I'm afraid, with good governance, start having to put a few rules in place, a few powers and accountabilities, and governance just merely states that. What are the rules? Who's got accountability? Who can make decisions? Up to what level? How are you going to review those? How are you going to value them? So putting a few of those in place at the start will be useful. Sorry, as you grow and meet these things, will be useful. But if you haven't got the time to do it, or it's not your bag to do it, you'll have somebody in the organization who possibly, or an advisor who will do it with you. There's plenty of good material out there from organizations who will help you free of charge. Certainly in the UK anyway, help you do that free of charge, some advice and guidance free of charge. It's what my company, the growth company, does. That's part of its business. The growth hub.
That's the growth hub. Yes, the growth hub. Even Chamber of Commerce's as well.
Absolutely. Federation of Small Business. Your local. Be careful about. You always got to be careful about taking advice from the happy amateur. You want to take professional advice.
That's so true. I like the idea about the happy amateur. Yeah, because you have quite a number of those out there as well.
And they always sit next to you in the pub.
And especially after two beers,
Oh yeah,
yeah, they're an expert at everything. Listen,
indeed.
Mike, we're coming up to the hour, and I want to respect time of your time. You've been amazing in terms of giving us the time to do this, and I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone who decided to jump in and participate on this webinar. The recording will be available, and if you are not yet in our community, feel free to join us on social media, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, at Lumerous PLC, and get involved in the conversation. Mike, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll have you on again for another topic around something. I mean, you have so much things we can talk about as well, right?
Great to see you,
So,
Remy. Lovely to
brilliant.
talk.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye for now.
Bye now. Take care, everyone. I think there's like a 30 seconds delay um, with LinkedIn. So
Yes.